Hey, I'm Pastor Joel, and just want to say thank you for downloading or streaming this message today. My prayer for you is that you're blessed by the content that you hear. As a church, our desire is to make disciples of Jesus, and we do that by helping people to trust and follow Him in every aspect of their daily life. So if this is something that blesses you, we just hope that you'll feel free to share this with others so that they might be encouraged and challenged by it as well.
The Bible says, my king is a king of the Jews. He's a king of Israel. He's a king of righteousness. He's the king of the ages. He's the king of heaven. He's the king of glory. He's the king of kings. And he's the Lord of lords. That's my king. I wonder, do you know him? My king is a sovereign king. No means of measure can define his limitless love. Do you know him? He's the greatest phenomenon that has ever crossed the horizon of this world. He's God's son. He's a sinner's savior. He's the centerpiece of civilization. He's unparalleled. He's unprecedented. I wonder if you know him today. He supplies strength for the weak. He guards and he guides. He heals the sick. He forgives sinners. He serves the unfortunate. I wonder if you know him. He's the key to knowledge. He's the doorway of deliverance. He's the pathway of peace. He's the roadway of righteousness. He's the highway of holiness. He's the gateway of glory. Do you know him? I wish I could describe him to you. He's indescribable. He's incomprehensible. He's invincible. He's irresistible. You can't outlive him, and you can't live without him. The Pharisees couldn't stand him, but they found out they couldn't stop him. Pilate couldn't find any fault in him. Herod couldn't kill him. Death couldn't handle him, and the grave couldn't hold him. Yeah, that's king.
Yeah, amen. Amen. Well, welcome. My name is Nathan. I am the youth pastor here, and Joel has graciously and courageously bestowed upon me the Britney Spears mic today to let me preach. It's always an exciting time when the youth pastor gets on stage because you never really know what's going to happen. So the pastor's probably a little scared, and the rest of us, man, we just hold on tight and hope I don't say anything too stupid. So hopefully this will not be my last time with you, but it might be. That's the fun of it. As most of you guys know, I grew up in the church. My dad is a full-time children's minister at West Colonial Hills Baptist in Colonial Heights, and we're actually this year celebrating his 20th year anniversary of full-time ministry at that church. He was there a little bit longer than that, doing some part-time ministry work, but he's been there for 20 years on a full-time scale, and even though right now he's doing just children, when we started, Dad was the minister of children and music, and senior adults, and outreach, and plunging toilets, and everything else in between. And so a vast majority of my childhood was spent in the church doing like church things. So, every Tuesday he would drag me to outreach. We would go to the nursing home a lot, which for anxious, scared, introverted Nathan was always a very intimidating place to be. But not only did I get to do like the normal church things, I was the staff kid. So there's like a certain like celebrity status that you get when you're the staff kid, and you get to do some of the special things. And so I got to do some of those special things. One of them was I almost always got to play like the main part in the children's plays that we would do, which I thought at the time was because of my acting prowess, but it was actually probably because my mom was the one who was directing the plays, and that meant I was going to be there, so I had the highest probability of getting the lines right, which I usually didn't. And the other things I would get to do, Nelson, if you got my pick for me, during Christmas, that is not actually the real Mary and Joseph. The real Joseph was a little taller, I think, but I got to play the hallowed role of Joseph in the Nativity. I'll have you know, I got down on one knee and held my staff really about as well as you possibly could. Also, quick side note, Mary in this picture, her name is Olivia. We're still good friends today. Olivia is married. She lives right outside of Charlotte. Her husband is a firefighter and has a cool mustache, and he's very cool. And she has this awesome job where she's like writing curriculum for French classes and like doing really well. And I'm not jealous at all. I had a Pop-Tart this morning, and it was cookie dough flavored, so I'm doing just fine too. I'll have you know. But yeah, so I got to do that. And then but the highlight for me, and let's please get that off the screen. The highlight for me was probably when Easter season came around. So we just got done celebrating kind of our Easter season here, and that's what kind of got my mind thinking. And during Easter, if you know anything about growing up in the church in like mid to late 90s, early 2000s, Easter season meant it was time for the Easter cantata, which meant we would have our church choir. We had things like that back then, and they would present basically a glorified musical on Easter. And there were all sorts of little acting parts and singing parts and stuff like that. And, you know, staff kid, I got to do a lot of those things. And probably the best role that I played in our Easter cantata had to do with when we would do the part for Palm Sunday, where we would recognize the triumphant entry of Jesus into Jerusalem when he comes in on the back of a donkey and people greet him with like waving the palm branches and laying down their cloaks. So what that meant for us at the time was that me and all of my little friends, we would all go to the back of the church and we would put on our little robes and our sandals. And when we get our palm branches, I have a special, this is, I mean, you have no idea. These are the actual original palm branches from West Colonial Hills Baptist Church that were probably waved by yours truly years ago. I mean, high level artifacts here. I had Mom go see if she could find it. And true story, I think she found it in the bottom drawer of a filing cabinet in a second grade classroom underneath some staples. So it's good to know that they're really taking care of these precious artifacts over there. But we would get our palm branches and we would line up in the back. And, you know, I'm always in the front because I was child palm branch waver number 1. And so I was in the staff kid, y'all. So I'm in the front. My buddy Seth, he was like palm branch waver number 5. He would try really hard, but he just couldn't wave his palm branch quite as well as me. And so we would all line up in the back and we would wait for our cue, and the choir would be singing. And when we got our cue, what you would do is you would go down the aisle and you would wave your palm branches and you would act your part. And so we're back here getting all hyped up and giving each other pep talks. And, you know, I'm like listening to my little CD player, like trying to get into character. And if you've never done acting in your life, let me kind of give you how this works. If you're a beginner, you would go with kind of like the Mr. Miyagi paint the fence up and down vertical motion. You kind of hit it with one of these. That's for beginners. If you were a little bit more experienced, then you could get a little crazy with it and add a lateral motion. And so your palm branch can be doing kind of like the figure 8 motion, the little X, the snake. I mean, you could do all sorts of good stuff if you've been there for a while. But I was obviously advanced child palm branch waver number 1. And so what I would do is I would also add in the feet. The feet are key. You would kind of get in touch with your inner like tribal warrior dancer and kind of get the feet going and then the palm branch waving at the same time. And it's obviously very impressive. I don't want to hit you with the full thing. I don't think you can handle it. And then, and the key to any acting, obviously, is in the facial expressions, because even though I was very focused on my job and my skills, as you actors know, it's important for you to portray the inner works of the character. So palm branch waver number 1 was very excited to see Jesus that day. So I had to make sure that my facial expressions had like a sense of elation and joy. And so if you would please bear with me, and I'm going to take you back to circa 1997. And I would be in the back and I'm getting hyped up, and here we go. Get your Snapchat ready. I would got my cue and it's time to go. And here we go. We hit them with one of these. And scene. Clap for me, please. Thank you. Yes. Special, I know. That's amazing. I I know it seems crazy, but at the time, in my 7-year-old mind, in my 7-year-old world, I, Palm Branch Waver number 1, was the star of that whole show. In my mind, every eye in that auditorium was on me, and they're all paying attention to how awesome Nathan was at waving his palm branch. It was almost as if like their very eternities rested on my ability to wave their palm branch, like they were going to go home in tears, moved by my performance, and like their lives would be changed forever, and they'd be telling their grandchildren one day about that time where they saw Nathan wave his palm branch. And like that's kind of my mindset, which when you're 7, like the whole world revolves around you, and when you get older, that's supposed to change, and I'm still waiting on it to change, honestly, if I'm being real. But that's kind of my mindset. And I tell you this because I think that in the actual day when the actual Jesus rode into Jerusalem on the back of an actual donkey, I bet there were some people in the crowd whose mentalities were fairly similar to mine. It wasn't totally crazy and random for them to wave palm branches for Jesus. At the time, this was a very common traditional thing to do in the Roman Empire for a king that was returning from victory, from battle. So you've probably seen this on movies or TV shows where the king would be coming back from being victorious, and the people would line the streets and the gates would open, and he would march in and parade in on his horse. And the army would be behind him, and people would cheer, and they would throw flowers, and they would wave palm branches, which was the Roman symbol for victory. And so they were just cheering, and they were praising the king who had delivered them from their enemies. They were praising the king who went out and fought on their behalf. That's what they were doing. And so in a sense, the people who were there that day had a decent view of who Jesus was, because he was a king, just like we saw in the video just a second ago. He was a king, and he was a victorious king. Unfortunately, these people kind of expected him to be a king who was going to deliver them from the oppression of the physical Roman government, when the reality is he came to deliver them from something so much greater, the oppression of sin and evil on a spiritual level, right? But that was probably their mentality. And so I would imagine that the people, they found out Jesus was coming, so they woke up early that morning, super excited. They probably went out and tried to find the biggest, coolest, most awesome palm branch that they could find, hopefully a little bit bigger than this one. And they came up and they tried to get in the front row of the parade so that they could be right there. And when Jesus came by, I bet they were going to wave the stink out of their palm branches, hoping that maybe Jesus would notice them, hoping that maybe if I can wave my palm branch cool enough and big enough, Jesus would notice me. He would look at me. And not just for the celebrity status, so they could go tell their friends later, like, oh my goodness, Jesus looked at me. No, remember, Jesus had been out doing healings and miracles. And so I bet that some of them were thinking, man, if I can just wave my palm branch wild enough and well enough, he will look at me, and not only look at me, but notice my issues and take interest in my life. Maybe someone was there and their father was sick and dying, and they thought, man, you know what? If I can just wave my palm branch wild enough, Jesus might notice me and he might heal my father. Or maybe somebody was there with a difficult financial situation, and they were thinking, if I can just wave my palm branch crazy enough, then maybe Jesus will notice me and he'll help me with my financial situation. Maybe he'll notice me and heal my marriage. Maybe he'll notice me and fill in the blank. And that was probably the mentality of many people during that time. And I think that this is something that we kind of see in the church still today, is this idea that if we can just do enough, if we can just be good enough, if we can just go to church enough, then maybe we can earn the attention and the favor of God, and he'll come into our lives and he'll fix us. Right? It's this idea of maybe if I can just be a good enough person, God will take interest in my life. Maybe if I can be a good enough person, he will take interest and he'll heal my sickness, or he'll heal my marriage, or he'll start to do miracles in my life. I just got to earn it first. I've got to be a good enough person to earn it. And there's a couple problems with that. The first problem is that there's no way that you or I could ever do anything good enough to actually earn anything. The irony is probably some of the best people that have ever walked the earth were there that day. They're called Pharisees. And a lot of times in church, when we hear the word Pharisee, we just kind of slide that aside as if, those are the bad guys. Well, the reality is those were actually the best of the good guys. These were the goody goods of the goody goods. The Pharisees were the religious elite. These were the ones this is crazy, at an early age, actually, they had memorized the first 5 books of the Bible. That's Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. Memorized. I mean, how many of us have even read those things all the way through? You're like, I'm going to read through the Bible, and we get about halfway through Leviticus, and we're like, no, okay, no more of that. We're going to skip to 1 Kings where all the battles and wars are, right? Like they had these things memorized. They kept all the laws, all the rules. They were the best of the best people. In fact, they took it to an extreme. They would say things like, you say we're supposed to keep the Sabbath day holy, so we're not going to work. And not only are we not going to work, I'm not even going to take 100 steps today. I'm going to limit my step count to under 100 because I want to prove how good I am. So these were like the best of the best. I'm telling you, they were way better than you or I will ever be. And was Jesus impressed with them? Did Jesus say, thank you for being so good, you have earned my favor? No, he called them snakes and vipers. And he said, the inside of you is like a grave, like a dead man. Right? Even the Pharisees weren't good enough to earn anything. For all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. The problem, our human nature problem, is that no matter how good we live our lives, no matter how moral we are, no matter how much we go to church, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, there's nothing that you and I could ever do to earn the favor of God. Paul says that even the best that he has to offer, even his best works, are as filthy, dirty rags. Translation's a little bit different. Best translation is they're poop rags. It's like used toilet paper, the best I have to offer. And the worst translation is even worse than that. And so like even the best I have to offer, says Paul, even the best of my morality it's like dirty rags compared to God. Like it's useless. So the first problem is no matter how good we are, we can never be good enough to earn, not only earn salvation, but even just earn the attention and the favor of God, right? And the other thing that I think that we run into when we as a church start to live with this mentality of I'm going to be good enough to earn favor is we start to paint a very scary, dangerous picture of God to the rest of the world. See, there was another group of people that was there that day who I think maybe had an even better understanding of who God was. And those were not the people up here waving their palm branches trying to get Jesus to notice them. They were the people who were hiding in the shadows. They're the ones in the background who were ashamed and hoping Jesus probably didn't see them. These were the social outcasts. These were the dirty, the sick, the lepers. These were the prostitutes and the thugs and the thieves. And they probably had more of a mentality of, man, I'm interested in this Jesus thing, but I'm disgusting, I'm nasty, I'm no good. He's not interested in me. I'm not as good as those Pharisees. I'm not even as good as those palm branch wavers. I'm not like them. I'm just not good enough. And so they kind of set back like this. And I actually think there's a beauty to this because it parallels very well with what we see in the Old Testament when people would see and recognize God. Think about Adam and Eve when they're in the Garden of Eden and they sin and their eyes are opened and they see good and evil and they recognize how good God is and how not good they are. What's their response? It's a response of humility. It's a response of hiding and shame and guilt. They recognize not only their physical nakedness, but also their spiritual inadequacy. They're hiding from God. They're like, God, don't look at me like I'm sinful. I think about Isaiah, who at the time, he's a prophet of God, and he was probably one of the best guys on the planet at that time. I mean, the best of the best on the planet. And he has that vision in Isaiah 6 where he says he saw the Lord seated on a throne high and lifted up, and there's angels singing and flying and all these things. And his response is to back up and start casting woes upon himself. He starts saying like, woe is me, for I'm a man of unclean lips. Like, I'm not worthy to be here. The best of the best. And when he sees God, his response is one of humility. Moses at the burning bush, he takes his sandals off. He's like, I'm not even worthy to stand here. Elijah, when God passes by and he covers his face, he's like, God, I can't even look at you. I'm so unworthy. So there is a beauty to this response of like this unworthiness of God. But the problem is it's an unworthiness without any hope, right? So I love the idea of humility, but they were not only recognizing their own sinfulness, but they felt like there was no hope for them because they just weren't as good as the other people. And I think that there's people that we know today that feel the same way. I can't tell you how many times I've had conversations with people, especially recently, and the conversations go something like this. They'll say, like, Nathan, like, of course this God thing and this Christian thing works for you because when you were 7, you were like prancing down, like literally prancing down the aisles with palm branches at your church. But when I was 7, like, I was rolling blunts for my dad. Like, our lives are completely different. You just don't understand. God's not interested in me. Like, of course this works for you, Nathan. When you were 12, you were leading Christian clubs at your school, but like when I was 12, I was being abused by my family. I'm disgusting. I'm nasty. Like, God's not interested in me. When you were 16, you were going off to mission trips and sharing the gospel with people overseas. But when I was 16, like, I had a child out of wedlock, and then I decided to have an abortion, and I've regretted it ever since. And like, I've messed up too much. I'm gone too far. Like, God's just not interested in me, right? And that's the kind of the picture. It's this picture of like humility, but with no hope. There's no hope there. Because I'm not as good as you are. And that's what's scary for me sometimes when we as a church start to kind of portray this persona of waving our palm branches of morality and waving our palm branches of church attendance and waving our palm branches of you fill in the blank and trying to show off how good we are, because the rest of the world could be confused by that. And they're like, but I'm not as good as you are, so God's not interested in me, right? And again, there's a beauty to this because we are all unworthy. Like, God shouldn't be interested in us. For all have sinned and fallen short of the God. The best person here, whoever the best person is that's here, I don't know, Scotty probably, even Scotty is not good enough to earn favor from God. But that's where grace comes in. And this is the beauty of grace. But where the grace of God, the fact that God would, a week later, after all this palm branch stuff, or Jesus would die and be raised again so that he could have a relationship with us, where all of this happens, even though it's so beautiful, it's also a little bit scandalous. What do I mean by that? Most of you guys know I used to be a teacher. Well, I am sort of a teacher. I don't really know what I am right now. I work at Woodridge Mental Hospital, but I used to be a teacher at Sullivan North High School. I taught math, mostly 9th grade. It's a beautiful time, very smelly. And I had all these kinds of interesting stories I could tell you, but one of my favorite students that I ever taught, his name was Dylan. And I just want you to know, if Dylan was here right now, he would tell you the exact same stories I'm about to tell you. We laugh about things like this a lot. I see him around town a lot. And Dylan, I didn't know Dylan for the first 2 months of school because he never showed up. When I read his name off of the roster on the first day, some of the kids in the room, they started laughing. They were like, oh, Dylan's probably not ever going to show up. He doesn't really do school. I was like, oh, okay. So about 2 months later, this kid walks in late, kind of comes in with nothing, just plops down. I'm like, hey, man, like, welcome to North. Like, where are you coming from? Are you new? He's like, no, my name is Dylan. There's just the truancy people told me I had to be here, and that's the only reason I'm here. I was like, oh, well, good to meet you too. Welcome to class. Here's your syllabus, blah, blah, blah. And it was about a week later, so I'd only been with Dylan for about a week, when I got my welcome to Dylan, welcome to public education, welcome to North and Bloomingdale and everything moment, all in the same place. I will never forget this story, and I promise you it's 100% real. Dylan comes in late, as usual. He plops down in his seat. I can still see it. It was in the front corner right next to the door, so when he came in late, it was convenient for him. He could just sit there. And he sits down, he raises his hand. I'm like, hey, Dylan, what's up, man? And he goes, yo, is it cool if I take a couple of puffs on my cigarette real quick? I was just like, oh, well, I wasn't expecting this question today. This is strange. And I remember my response. I don't know if it was good or bad, but don't judge me because you don't know what you would do in that place either. And I was like, well, Dylan, I really appreciate you for asking, but no, man, that's not going to be cool. I'm not going to be able to let you do that in my classroom right now. And the audacity of his response to that was even more than his audacity to the question, because when I told him, no, man, you can't illegally smoke your cigarette in here, he goes, man, you don't let us do nothing, dog. You don't let us do nothing in here. And I was just like, what is life? Like, am I supposed to apologize for this? I don't even know what's happening in my world today. So he was like, oh, you don't let us do nothing. Needless to say, Dylan, for the rest of that semester, didn't do much. He didn't show up much. When he did, he never did anything. If I would like hand him a paper, he would rip it up just to like make a point. Okay, that's fine. So he didn't really do much that year. He wasn't really the picture of the greatest student. And at the end of the semester, what I usually like to do is about a week before final exams is I'll invite students one by one to come meet with me. I'll show them like, hey, here's your grades. Like we got final exams coming up. If you can get this on the final, then you can maybe get this grade. And here's some things we can do to get ready for that. And when it was time for Dylan to come up, Dylan, come on up here. I was like, dude, like, so here's your grades. And dude, I'm sorry, but even if you get 100 on your final, in fact, if you get like a 300, you're still not going to be able to pass my class. So I'm like handing him the summer school papers right there. I was like, you might as well go ahead and start this because this is where you and I are going to be seeing each other. And it's cool. We actually were able to build a really good relationship over the next couple of years. And I didn't teach him a whole lot of math, but we were able to help him like get his driver's license, get a car, get a job. I think last time I saw him, he was at the Taco Bell making it. It's always a fun interaction with old Dylan, one of my guys. But needless to say, like he didn't deserve to pass my class, right? Now, what would you say? What would be your gut reaction if I told you that I decided, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and give you an A and let you pass? How would you respond to that? Like, oh my gosh, that is the worst teacher of all time, right? This is the problem with kids these days. We're just giving them handouts. They just want handouts, blah, blah, blah. Like probably something like that, right? And you wouldn't be wrong. How dare you do that? What would be the response of the other kids in that class? What about the kid who worked so hard for that grade and he stayed after school every single day and for tutoring and he just barely got by with the C that he worked so hard for, and then he turns around and he's like, wait, I did all of this and you're just gonna give Dylan an A? He doesn't deserve it. He didn't even show up half the time. He never did anything. He was disrespectful. He threw things at you. He spat at you. Like he doesn't deserve this. This is so not fair, right? That would not be fair. I think we'd all agree. Well, I hate to be the bearer of good, bad news to you, but that's actually a fairly accurate picture of exactly what Jesus did for all of us. There's nothing that we did or ever could do to earn anything. There's nothing that we could do to earn salvation. There's nothing we can do to earn a relationship with him. There's nothing we can do to earn his favor and his willingness to have a part in our lives. There's nothing we can do. The best we have to offer are dirty rags. We're the Dylans. Even the best of us here are the Dylans who don't deserve anything. And yet God, in his grace, in his mercy, in his love, while we were still sinners, decided to die for us. He decided to give us that A. And it was even bigger than what I would be able to do with Dylan, because for Dylan, all I would have had to do is hit a button, voila, A. God sent his son to die a gruesome death in order to pay for our sins. And yet he was willing to do that even though we had nothing to offer him, even though we didn't deserve it. That's grace, and that's like the whole Christian thing. Like that's it. Like that's what we do. Everything that we do is centered around that idea that we didn't earn it, we didn't deserve it, and God gave it to us anyway. That's why we do what we do. That's why we're here, right? It's because we were the Dylans, and yet God died for us. The last thing I want to share with you, and then we can go take some nappies. I was listening to a pretty well-known pastor. His name is Matt Chandler. Many of you have probably heard of him. A few months ago, I was listening to a sermon of his, and he told this story that really stuck with me. He told a story about how when he was a freshman in Bible college, he and basically his life group, he and his friends, had gotten to know this girl. She was 26, a single mother. She'd had a child when she was in high school, and she was, at the time, in a relationship with a married man who wasn't the father of the baby. And she hadn't grown up in church, had no idea about any of the spiritual elements of things, but she was going through a really tough time and just desperate for answers and seeking help. And so they had been ministering to this girl and helping her out and trying to disciple her. And And he tells a story about how one of his friends, who's a band member, was going to put on a concert. And so they invited her. They're like, hey, do you want to come to this Christian concert with us? And she said, sure. So they go to this concert, and she comes with them. And when the band finished playing, the pastor got up and started to just very angrily berate people who were in sexual sin. He started to just with a lot of hatred in his heart, talk about how terrible people were who were in the midst of sexual sin and how they were disgusting and horrible people. And he started throwing out statistics on STDs and things like that, and just really just berating people like that. And so Matt's sitting here knowing who's sitting beside him and feeling very uneasy about what's being said. And the pastor's big kind of crescendo to the whole thing was he took a rose and he threw it out into the crowd, and he said, I want you guys to take this rose. I want you to pass it around. Everybody, make sure you get a hold of the rose. I want you to kind of fiddle with it. And at the end, he got the rose back. And when he got the rose back, the rose had been all sorts of messed up. It had been ripped off. The petals were gone. The stem was broken. It was all kinds of destroyed. And his big crescendo moment was the pastor held up that rose, that broken rose, and he said, look at this disgusting broken rose, this useless rose. He said, who would want this? Who in the world would want this? And Matt was sitting there, and the girl beside him was just bawling. She was in tears. And Matt said he wanted so badly in that moment to stand up and say, Jesus wants that rose. Jesus wants the rose. Jesus wants the messed up, broken, disgusting rose. Jesus loves that rose. Y'all, this is the whole thing. This is it. This is everything that we do is based on this. This is why we're here. This is why we build buildings with steeples. This is why we sing the songs. This is why we read the book. This is why we have fish on the back of our cars. It's because we were this. We were all this. Nobody here has ever been or ever will be this one. But even the best among us are still this. And yet Jesus, while we were still sinners, decided, I want that rose. Not that we loved him or had anything to offer to him, but that he loved us and said, you know what? I want you in your brokenness, in your mess. I want to have a relationship with you. I still want you. That's the grace that God bestowed upon us. And that's why we do what we do. We don't wave our palm branches of morality just to show off how good we are. We do it and we live lives of obedience because God loved us when we were this. And out of just pure thanksgiving and adoration for an almighty God that would love me when I was like this, like I can't help but want to honor him and obey him. That's why we do it. This is why we go and share the gospel with others. We don't do it just so that we can check it off of our list. We don't do it so we can get more people on our team. We don't do it so we can go out there and tell all those dirty sinners how wrong they are. No, that's not it at all. We do it because we were this, and God came in and restored us and made us new and gave us new life and joy. And we've experienced like this amazing grace of God, and we just can't help but want others to experience it as well. That's why we do what we do. This is huge. This is it. This is the whole thing. Grace, love, mercy of God. It's Jesus looking down on the people who felt dirty, the people who were abused, and saying, no, I think you're beautiful. I want to make you into something beautiful. It's him looking down on the people who felt hopeless, like there was no hope for them, and giving them meaning and purpose. It was God looking down on people who were dealing with depression and just barely making it through day by day, dealing with suicidal thoughts and tendencies. And God said, no, I want to give you joy, and I want to give you life, and life more abundantly. He looked down on the people who were unwanted and felt unloved, and the people who felt like there's no way that anyone could ever love me. There's no way anybody could ever want me. And he said, actually, I do. I want you, and I'm going to adopt you into my family, and I want to make you a son and a daughter and an heir to the throne. That's the whole thing. Not just so that we can go to heaven one day when we die, but that so he can have a relationship with us here on earth, that he can be a part of our lives. He wants to be a part of our lives, even though we have nothing to offer him in return. That's why we do it, right? And that's the beauty of it. God is not a God who only wants you when you're pretty enough. God's a God who wants you here. He's going to change you from the inside out, not the outside in. That's why we worship. That's why we sing. So I think the takeaways are this. I think the takeaways, for one, if you're someone, maybe like me, you've been in the church your whole life, you've served the Lord faithfully for many years, and I think that we sometimes fall into the rut of just doing more stuff. And we fall into that religion where we have to do more and be good. And we do it because out of a sense of duty. And we want to make sure that people know that we're good people, and we do it for the outward piece. And it's easy to fall into that. And so I think that maybe your prayer today would be a prayer of just humility, a prayer of like, God, like, help me to anew and afresh recognize my own sinfulness and my own depravity, and therefore understand how awesome you are and how great your mercy was for me. I think that if we can get into that place of humility, then we can see that. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for they will receive the kingdom of heaven. Right? Blessed are those who recognize that there's nothing they can do to deserve the love of God, for they are the ones who are going to really be able to appreciate who he is and what he's done for us. So I think maybe that's our prayer. But the second one, and this is honestly where like the true heart of this whole message is for me, is for those of us or those of you who maybe you identify with the people who are in the background that day. Maybe you identify with the people who felt like, man, I'm just too dirty and I'm too far gone and there's no way that God could ever want me. I'm not as good as those people. I don't have anything to offer. Like, there's no way God's interested in me. And if that's you, like, I just want to say, like, I am so sorry. I am so sorry that the church has portrayed to you a picture of a God who only accepts us if we look like this. Because that's not the God that we serve. That's not God at all. It's not God at all. We serve a God who loves us in our brokenness and wants to make us new. He wants to restore us. We serve a God who loves you not because of what you have to offer, but despite of what you don't have to offer. We love the God who loves us in our brokenness. I am so sorry that that's the picture of God that we've portrayed. And if you can hear anything and take anything away from this message, I want you to hear that, like, God loves you. Jesus loves you. This I know for the Bible and my experiences, and the person of Jesus tells me so. Little ones, broken ones, shattered ones, to him belong. For even though we are weak and we're messed up and we're going to continue to mess up, it's he that's strong, and it's he that's good, and it's he that loves us anyways, recklessly. If you want to know more about this Jesus, or you want somebody to pray for you after the service, or talk to you more about what this looks like, come find me, Pastor Joel. There'll be some elders out here in the front, in the foyer. Just grab us. Just tell us, hey, like, I want you to pray with me. I want to talk to you about some of the things going on in my life. If you just want somebody to listen, we'd be honored, and we would love to talk to you more about what it looks like to accept that grace and that mercy of a God who loves us in our brokenness. We would love to be that for you. But let's just take the next few moments and just be amazed at how awesome God is. The God of the universe, the creator of the universe, decided, he looked down on me. He looked down on me in my wickedness. And even though I had nothing to offer, he decided, you know what? I want to have a relationship with you. I want you. I want the broken roses. Let's pray. God, we're just so thankful. So thankful, blown away. I don't know what else to say, but to say thank you for the grace that you've bestowed upon us so undeservingly. We've done nothing. We can do nothing to deserve it. We continuously fail you. We continuously just spit in your face, and yet you continue to love us unconditionally. It's unbelievable. It's indescribable, the love that you have for us. And God, may that truth resonate through everything that we do. May our praise and our actions come from a place of thanksgiving and praise and adoration to the one who loved us even when we were broken. I thank you for who you are. I thank you for the way that you love. I thank you for the way that you continue to love. I thank you for who you are. It's in Jesus' name I pray.
Thanks so much for checking out our message today. We hope you were challenged and blessed by it. We want to invite you to come and worship with us in person if you live in the Tri-Cities area. We meet on Sunday mornings at 9 and 10:45 a.m. at One Fellowship Point in Kingsport, Tennessee. You can also get more information about us from our website or our mobile app. Have a great day.